and welcome to this English lesson about art. Art is an interesting thing in the world. There are many people who create things that we like to look at. In this English lesson about art, I'll primarily be talking about visual art, things like paintings and sculptures, and I'll get into it in a bit once we get into the lesson. There are, of course, things like music and other things that are considered arts as well, but this lesson will mostly be about the kind of art that you would use if you wanted to make a nice painting like this hummingbird that you see here. So once again, welcome to this English lesson about art. So as I said, I'm primarily in this English lesson going to be talking about visual arts. The visual arts are any type of art where you can see it. So I will get into all the details in a bit, but the visual arts can be anything such as, oh, this is a little low. Let me fix this for a sec. There we go. That's where I like to see it. The visual arts are anything like paintings, sketches, drawings, sculptures. I'm kind of giving away the next part of the lesson though, but the visual arts would be any type of art that you can see and appreciate. Sometimes we talk about a piece of art as a work of art. We usually use this phrase to talk about a very famous painting. You know, this is a famous work of art, I believe from Van Gogh, Bedrooms at Arles, I think it's called. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not an art expert. I'm an English expert. So, but we would consider this a work of art. When you are a painter and you become well known, you create a lot of works of art that people enjoy looking at. If I did a painting, I wouldn't call it a work of art. I would just call it a painting by Bob. But if I became a famous painter, I would certainly start to refer to it as that I have several works of art for sale. It's a way to, it's a more formal way to talk about art that you've created. And then we also have the term artwork. Artwork simply refers to any drawings that are maybe used in a book. If I was a painter, I could say, oh, I have a lot of artwork in my studio. So artwork is just another way to talk about things that you have created, things you have drawn or things you have painted. We would call that artwork. We also use it when you have, like if you write a book, you might hire someone to create artwork for the book. This would refer to the drawings and illustrations that would be in the book. And of course, a person who creates art is called an artist. There are many different types of artists in the world. This person, I would say, is a graffiti artist. They are making artwork on the wall of a building using paint. But anyone who is creative and likes to make things or to paint things or draw things, we would call them an artist. You might be a sculptor. A sculptor is someone who makes statues and sculptures, that's the name of the thing they make, out of stone or wood or other types of material. So painting is a very flat type of art, but sculpture is very three-dimensional. When you have something made by a sculptor, it has size and shape. So if you go to your local park, there might be some statues that were created by a sculptor. We would certainly refer to someone who likes to create art, someone who is creative, as being artistic. You could say she's very artistic. Her paintings are amazing. He's very artistic. He has a real eye for color. He's very artistic. He does beautiful pencil sketches. So if someone is really good at creating art, if they have talent, we would say that they are artistic. And they might get that talent naturally, or they might get that talent from taking an art class. So art classes, like the class I was in the other day, are classes where you learn the techniques and the methods for creating art. You'll learn how to paint with oil or with watercolors. You'll learn how to sketch with a pencil. You might learn how to create something out of crayon or clay. So art class is a place where you go, where there's usually a teacher who is very artistic who teaches you how to create artwork of different types. You can see these people here are in art class. They are learning how to create art. Now, you also might just be a natural. In English, this is a bigger term than just the art world. But in the art world, if you were to say he's a natural or she's a natural, it means the person is able to create really cool works of art and they don't have a lot of training. They've just on their own learned how to do it. They're a very creative person and they just know how to put colors together and how to paint and how to make something beautiful. We would call that person a natural. We also use this to talk about athletes or someone who's good at anything just very easily. If you handed your friend a guitar and if your friend didn't have guitar lessons and they could quickly learn to play a song, you might say, oh, he's a natural. Different types of artwork. So I've kind of mentioned most of these. There is something called drawing, where you simply take a pencil or pen or something we call a marker, maybe a crayon or a pencil crayon, and you simply take a piece of paper and you draw something. You look at something and try to reproduce it. Or if you're more creative, you try to draw something in a very artistic way. So drawing is certainly one way that people create art. You might like to sketch. This is a sketch. So I've just used it as a verb and a noun. Did you notice that? He likes to sketch sketches. You could say that. A sketch is usually a quick drawing, usually done with a pencil. And then if you were to start to color it and refine it and improve it, we would probably refer to it as a drawing. But if you just sit down and simply take a pencil and quickly sketch a picture onto a piece of paper, we would refer to it as a sketch. And we would use the verb sketch to talk about it. So you might sit down to sketch a sketch if you have some spare time. And then we also have, of course, painting. So when you like to paint, you will create a painting. You can see this person has their paintbrushes and they have either paper or canvas and they are creating a painting. You could also say that they are painting. Notice how we can flip these words around a little bit. In art class, they are going to be painting today. They are going to be painting their paintings. You could say that as well in English. A little tricky, but that is how the English language works. As I referred to before, a sculptor makes sculptures. Should I pronounce that again? A sculptor, let me zip back really quickly. A sculptor creates sculptures. So this is a sculpture of a lion. I think this might be in France. I don't know. I should have looked this up. But a sculpture, again, is a three-dimensional, a 3D piece of art or work of art. So you take marble or stone or wood and you use a hammer and chisel and you kind of fashion that material into something that looks more realistic, like this lion. So there you have a sculpture. I think this lion is in France. I usually know where my pictures are from, but I forget with this one. And then we also have something called a statue. And you might be wondering, what's the difference between a statue and a sculpture? Well, I didn't know this until yesterday. I just learned something new. Apparently, a statue is a sculpture of a person or animal. In order for something to be called a statue, at least my understanding of this, I could be wrong, a statue needs to be a person, an image of a person or an image of an animal, and then it can be called a statue. I didn't know that till yesterday. Photography. So art isn't just about painting. It isn't just about sculpture. It isn't just about making things in a creative way. Sometimes it's about using technology. And there's two types of technology in particular. Well, I guess one. There's the still camera and the video camera. If you're using a camera like this, you are doing what's called photography. You are taking pictures of things around you. You have an eye for looking at the world and framing it in a way where you can take a beautiful picture. It's definitely an art. The ability to take pictures that are beautiful is definitely an art. But you also do need, like I said, some technical skills. But photography, very cool. I would say Jen is very much into photography and she's very good at it. There's also filmmaking or making videos or videography. You can be a videographer. But I would just say the artistic way to talk about video would be to use the term filmmaking and the term filmmaker. By the way, someone who likes photography is a photographer. Someone who likes filmmaking is a filmmaker. So if you like to use your video camera to make films, you would be a filmmaker. If you like to tell stories using film, we would say that you are a filmmaker. Very, very cool type of art. And we also have digital art. So this didn't exist 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I wonder when digital art started. But digital art is the use of a computer to either manipulate images, create images, put images together, like this picture here is a combination of images. Digital art is very, very cool. In fact, I referred to, earlier I said I like modern art. I think I like digital art right now. In fact, right now there are computers that make images and people call that AI art, artificial intelligence art. I'm not sure that's real art. I think people have to make art for it to be real. But digital art is art made using a computer, either creating images, enhancing images, making them better, manipulating images, changing them, or combining images in different ways. Digital art. An artist, a painter, will use what's called an easel. Now, this isn't a very good picture here of an easel. The easel is the wooden thing that this artist has put their canvas on. So if you look behind the white canvas, you will see a piece of wood sticking out the top and a couple wooden legs at the bottom. This is what's called an easel. An artist will set up their easel on the street, outside, maybe in their studio, and then they will use that to hold the paper or canvas or whatever they are painting on. So that is an easel. They will, of course, if you are a painter, you will use a brush. You can just call it a brush. You can also call it a paintbrush. Artists have lots of different kinds of paintbrushes, thick paintbrushes, thin paintbrushes, small paintbrushes, large paintbrushes. And depending on what type of paint they are using, they might have different kinds of brushes as well. But I think we most often just call it a brush. A painter will use brushes. When you say paintbrush, it just feels like too many words. It's very common, but I think if I was to talk about an artist, I would say the artist is coming later today with their easel and their brushes and their paints, and they're going to paint something. As I mentioned earlier, if you're just doing a simple drawing or sketch, you will probably use a pencil. This person has what's called, I think it might be an HB pencil or a number 2 pencil. I don't know the exact specifics, but there are different types of pencils for doing artwork or sketching or drawing. And I think it's the softness of the lead in the pencil, I think, that changes. But this person has decided to use a pencil to draw a little cat. And of course, when children are young, and even older artists, when children are young, they often use crayons. A crayon is a colored type of pencil that's very soft. It's usually made of wax or some other soft material. But our children always had crayons when they were younger. In fact, in Ontario, Canada, when you go to a restaurant with your children, if it's a restaurant where you sit down, the waiter might bring crayons and some paper for your kids to draw on or color on while you're waiting for your food, if they're really young. So anyways, a crayon is kind of a waxy writing tool that is most often used by kids, but sometimes used